Welcome, everyone. Greetings and salutations. You are listening and watching simultaneously Rashkin Report and Silicon Curtain, with which I congratulate you and invite you to hit like and subscribe, as all decent people should do. And here we are for our weekly conversation with Jonathan Fink. Jonathan, hello over there on the other side of the pond.
Hello there. Highlight of my week, and I must say our audience have impeccable taste if they've not only tuned in, but if they have hung around to tune in, because we're running a little behind schedule this time round. But hopefully the content will be worth it, and people will
Unfortunately,
be
my
generous.
audience knows that this is Yuri's old tradition, running behind. I'm not like Putin running behind, but sometimes things
You're not
happen,
4 years behind, schedule.
right? Oh
And we've
goodness.
got we've
Yeah.
got interesting thumbnails. Mine's optimistic, but I think they're two sides of the same coin. I mean, you're pointing out that Russia has no way out, and I'm pointing out that Ukraine is incrementally winning, or the advantage is moving to Ukraine. But I think they're two sides actually of the same story, are they not?
They are, and it's just a matter of it's almost like A/B testing to see which is the title that audience is going to prefer. Do you want to see the one where Russia is going down, or do you want to see where Ukraine is going up? Either way, I think the situation is desperate for, on some level, for both countries, because I think Ukraine was really hoping that United States was going to do better. I
Yes, of
think they
course.
really failed to imagine, and that's what I've been struggling explaining for the past year, is just how not friendly this administration is going to be to Ukraine, no matter what they're going to say, no matter what deals they're going to talk about, and how 24 hours and all of that kind of business that people bought into. But in the
This
end,
is
the United States is what it is.
I mean, this is, I think, exemplified by Rubio's weasel words that he came out with. He was like, what do you want? I mean, we're selling you weapons, aren't we? And we're not selling them to Russia. I mean, that's something we need
It's
to
nice to
get
know
down
that
and
we have the same
grovel to.
concerns, the
Yeah,
same concerns.
it's. I mean, that man. I think, as I pointed out to someone earlier, a statue should be erected in his honor to show what a husk of a politician looks like. Someone who's burnt all of their principles, all of their strategy, all of their humanity, and they've burnt it up in service of, well, basically grifters and criminals like Trump. That's what it looks like. They should erect a big statue called the Hollow Man right there outside, the on the steps of the Parliament. I know that Lincoln is edifying, but actually, the Hollow Man or the Hollow Politician, I think, is something we need to try to learn from and eradicate from our systems.
It would be good, but perhaps the statue needs to be smaller, commensurate with the amount of influence that is being held. So almost something you like stumble over, like, oh, what is it?
Oh, whoops!
Oh,
You
oops.
stub your toe in it. You say a curse word. You're like, that's where Rubio could actually become. You could have the F word. You could have the C word. You could have the R word. Maybe that's a fitting memorial for him.
And for all those that are thinking that Rubio has a better chance of becoming United States president of the United States, he does not.
He
And
does
I
not.
No, I think there's a line of people that have a better chance than he does, simply because he's working on foreign affairs. I think that ultimately puts him in a vulnerable position, and that he is not the truest believer. It's just that his priorities of world change in Latin America, matches Trump agenda. But he's not a true, although he tries. It's important how brutality is a key feature of that whole regime, and how you have to the aesthetic of this is not brutalism in Stalin's architectural sense, but just sheer brutality, being mean to people, and being insulting, and that shows that you are somehow dominant rather than just an a-hole.
I
And it
don't think you can't even have the hint of being even vaguely ashamed of your lies, or the minute they come out of your mouth, as Trump managed to achieve this extraordinary thing, is he knows it's a lie maybe when his brain is formulating it. The minute it comes out of his mouth, he accepts it as truth. He lives it, he breathes it, he gets behind it. With Rubio, you've always got this sense that he knows he's lying. He knows he's hollowed out, he's clawed out his own soul and handed it over to Trump. So there's this slightly sort of meek, apologetic kind of whiff around him. Well, unfortunately, that's not the brutishness that is going to propel him to the White House in the current pack, the current administration. Does Vance seems to be seems to have that element of absolute callousness and the ability to lie without even a hint of shame.
Good point. When I think at Marco Rubio, think about Marco Rubio and this kind of what you're describing, that his eyes, kind of send this thing. It's like looking at a dog where you're like, oh, what I can, but it can't quite express it. But the eyes are they're kind, and well, that's his problem. He's going to have to work on that. But and according to prediction markets, because I started to check that out, because there seems to be another news story on that every 5 minutes. And there's probably betting going on whether there'll be another story on prediction markets in the next 5 minutes. And it seems like Vance is leading by far over Rubio. But the thing is that really, Jonathan, struck me today as I was looking. I just did a news recap for my viewers in Russian. And the theme is lies, the amazing lying that is part of the really foundation of Trumpism. And here's what I mean. We know that Trump lies when he sees something he doesn't like. He calls it whatever he wants. If he loses, he calls it a victory. We've been talking about it. The culture,
Aren't you tired of winning, Yuri? You must be
exactly
tired
right.
of winning by now.
But the fish rots from the head, right? And it gets down. So now I saw a news story that said that there's Republican voters, growing number, that have in polling denied that they voted for Trump.
Of course.
And that
a lot of people here
because,
denied they voted for Brexit, quite frankly. You asked
them,
and in polling, no, that wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Right. And in polling, there is a phenomenon where people will say, I voted for the winner, because the numbers don't seem to support it, but nobody wants to vote for the loser. So I remember hearing in high school that the numbers for Kennedy were higher, that more people said they voted for JFK than actually in reality did. But in this case, we have the declining number of people who will claim to have supported this president. But it gets better, because another news story talks about Republican politicians who didn't get Trump's endorsement acting like they did. So it's so throughout everything. So that's sometimes people will say that, Yuri, your headlines are kind of like, when I look at your headlines in the Ukrainian media, they almost look like clickbait. But this is just Ukrainian journalists competing with Republican politicians for I don't know, likes. It's crazy situation, because lying to that extent ruins trust. Because when people see a clickbait title, they don't go for it, because they don't trust the channel, the whatever. And I see this depending on who puts what title on what interview I give, that it affects the trust that people have there. But with Trump, it just doesn't matter.
No, there's no. In fact, most of the headlines normalize him to some extent, and much of the media coverage. I'm not saying your coverage at all, but much of the media coverage seems to, skip over the crazy, or try to find the little. It's like trying to find the little sweet corn in the turd, frankly, that sort of makes his speech look almost palatable. That of course is becoming more and more difficult, but there is a normalizing tendency, because the mad stuff is just too mad, I think, for them to cope with or to package up for their audiences. And in fact, they'd start losing audiences, because they'd be like, what are you showing us here? It's just too demented to watch it end to end and take it in for what it really is.
See, what we have, though, is like Trump world that is so disconnected from reality that we don't see familiar things in there, because the speech, since I guess we can spend 2 seconds on State of the Union,
Mm.
because I've been talking about it nonstop in Russian, and I'm like, time to summarize this. I'm thinking that it was really notable for all the things he didn't say, because
Mm.
he didn't talk about, he never mentioned Biden. He never mentioned ICE. He never mentioned like a whole bunch of list of things that I was just going through, going, wow, that wasn't mentioned. He has his own reality where he is like winning, and it's like unicorns and Care Bears or whatever.
Rainbows and Care Bears and rainbows. Yeah.
Right. And then there's like the rest of us. And I think that's also kind of a problem for him, because you can only call people that disagree with your policies, enemies for so long before people are like, you say that there's gasoline for under $2 a gallon. And he's been saying, not everybody, many people have not heard this, but there's gasoline for under $2 a gallon. He's been saying this since April, and it's not true. There's
Not
like
true.
no
I mean,
place, like
no.
maybe you'll find a place somewhere that has under $2 a gas for gallon, but that's really rare, and that's not like what's happening in this country.
He referred back to the so-called cost of living crisis as well, I think. Again, saying, it's not true. It's gone away. They don't talk about it anymore. We fixed it, etc. And I'm coming to think that actually there is no reality beyond the event horizon of his ego. There is no model of reality there. For him, everything is a narrative. And the narrative is important to him if it has the power to manipulate the world into a shape that he wants, and to manipulate people into either the sort of servile puppets that he wants, or the instruments of his hate, retribution, and all the rest of this. And it seems to me that all of his reactions hinge on whether he has the capacity to manipulate, or whether reality starts to intrude and counter, the sort of evil Care Bears and unicorns version he wants. There is nothing else. So he doesn't inhabit the same reality as us, and he does not have, I would say, the same. I mean, not everyone's well intentioned, but I think by and large, most people are generally quite well intentioned in the majority of their daily activities. He is not. He is not well intentioned, so he neither lives on the sort of same plane as of humanity as us, nor on the same plane of reality. And yet, the media needs to craft that into a narrative, as you say, that is familiar to us. So if they're constantly normalizing or seeking to explain or sane wash, as I've seen that phrase. And this has been maybe one of the biggest learnings for me, is how fundamentally not necessarily broken the legacy media is, and it fundamentally is, or at least its commercial models are broken, but how incapable it is of dealing with these extraordinary times we live in. There's a great journalist in the UK who's a radio journalist called James O'Brien, and he talked today about the UK and how you had Zelensky, the head of MI6, you had the head of the armed forces, all saying the same thing this week on the fourth anniversary, is that we are heading into World War III. We are heading into a direct confrontation with Russia. It may not look like World War II or World War One, but it is barreling towards us. All the signs are there, and their message was, we need to wake up and we need to organize for it. And his point was that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this would have set off the alarm bells in Britain, not just in the media and the political classes, but everywhere. The alarm would have been going off, and people would have been clamoring, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? How can we get as much money into defense and deterrence as possible? And he said the curious thing is, there is no alarm bell. You have these voices saying, here it is, it's coming, it's coming down the track, let's get ready. And they're being met with tumbleweed. Not, he pointed out, in Sweden and Finland and the Baltics. There, the alarm bells are ringing, and they're hearing them. In Britain, there's this, again, curious parallel reality detached from a lot of the stuff that we're talking about.
I think it really helps if people just accept as an axiom that Trump and Putin operate by the same set of rules and standards and principles. They have different options available for them, clearly. One is a president of a, swamp, and another is president of the unhinged states of America, USA. But they operate using the same set of values. And on top of that, we see a president who, and I like the description by a psychiatrist on a podcast, who said that we don't see people like that in society in general, because when they're this violent and aggressive and older, they're heavily sedated. So usually
Felicity,
they
that's
are
right.
sitting in a nursing home drooling
Yes,
rather
yes.
than being attacking, everybody else. And then
Yeah, and the nurse comes down the stairs into the staff room and rolls her eyes and go like, "Oh, what shift did you have? I was on the Donald this morning, and oh, he's off on one again."
right. But
They're
apparently,
confined to that.
right, but democracy apparently means you don't have to take your medications. And so what we see is, and this is my experience speaking to some nurses in my life, who explain that when people get like they lose control, mental control, they get usually more sexually and violent, sexualized and violent. And the problem is, while that summarizes Trump's policies, and his rhetoric and his kind of the whole brutality, it's backfiring spectacularly, because when he talks about his brutality, we now think about Minnesota and the executions of Americans on American streets by masked federal agents. That doesn't play anymore. So he didn't mention Minnesota. He doesn't mention ICE. He talks about strong police force on our streets, but he didn't even mention Putin. I mean, just like among the list, but whatever. But the other thing is that when he tries to be like, I'm a virile man. Look at these good looking this, good looking that, and he talks about like firefighters and good looking. But then we immediately think about the Epstein case. So he can't go to his like two areas. I feel like, even though his base might overlook a lot of things and they will deny, deny, deny. But I think he's stuck in a situation where he can talk about fewer and fewer things, because it all leads. He didn't even mention Biden, and I figured he would have like crushed him up and down. But it's a different mindset with its own drawbacks, and seeing it as such. Yes, I think that
Mm.
when you talk about what happened, how differently we would have responded to this years ago, to me, that's about the experience of veterans of World War II. That is a generation that has gradually left us, and left us feeling optimistic about all sorts of great things. But at the same time, what did I see yesterday? That well, without going to that, to our title, we in the United States are kind of stuck, potentially, it seems like, with no way out. And Putin, who plays by Trump's rule, is also stuck with no way out. And in a really fascinating situation, because, like, peace process, for instance, is a place where no one can get out. They're all stuck in it. Ukraine's stuck in it. States are stuck in it because we can't leave. And Russia is stuck in it. And it's like, this is a weird kind of a perversion, but perversion is the favorite area for Russia and Trump to operate in.
Yeah,
So
and they
this,
get all the headlines. They get all the headlines, and the fact that Putin is as you said in one of our recent episodes, he was given a golden opportunity when Trump came along to basically call an end to this, and to shape the optics in his favor. At the start of last year, it's quite possible he could have frozen the lines, and he could have got all those incredible optics of going to Alaska and all the rest of it and getting concessions, and he could have kickstarted the economy because Trump would have literally dropped all the tariffs and so on. He had a golden opportunity to reset at that point and almost in his own terms come out as a winner, not for anyone with any shred of morality left, but there was that opportunity. And he seems locked into this vicious cycle of trying to achieve unachievable goals and inflicting trauma and pain on the world. It's almost a psychological state. He's now, I think, got himself into a state, a political state, where, as you say, there's no way out. It's a tupik or a cul-de-sac. And Trump has joined that circle by not applying pressure on Russia and not assisting the victim, who, let's face it, if there was full-throated support from the US and, dare I say it, Europe as well, and if we actually took sanctions seriously, we'll come to that in a minute, because it's kind of pretty shocking how unseriously we've been implementing sanctions, then Russia would have been on a very fragile trajectory long before now, last year, the year before. But it seems we're still on this course. And another piece of news that came today, and again, I need to look behind it because sometimes headlines can be quite disingenuous, but the implication of this article was that European leaders have been talking about putting peace forces in Ukraine after the war, when there's lots of problems with that anyway, like you have to win first and we don't have enough troops. Anyway, getting past those issues, apparently they have in private been saying, well, of course, we can only deploy peacekeepers with the approval of Vladimir Putin. I mean, if that's what they privately think, if
Well,
those
there's
are
a
the
nice
conditions,
excuse, isn't there?
it's insanity. So I'm afraid to say the weakness, yes, is there in the US, but the fundamental weakness and inability to see strategically what's going on is unfortunately baked into a lot of Europe as well. Central Europe, perhaps, because I think the Baltics and Nordics have a slightly more sensible view on these things.
But I wonder to what extent Russia stuck angle is really important not to kind of let out of sight, because today, earlier, a few hours ago, whatever, maybe less, I just saw an article from Medusa, I think, saying the Telegram is about to be completely banned for, except for on the front, because they tried to switch it and they tried to have the Max thing. And the
Yes,
Max
but
thing
of
totally failed. It's got like hacked all over the place. So
course
now
it did. Yeah.
Telegram is going to be only on the front and everybody else off the Telegram. So what happens to all those Zetniks and all the military correspondents for spreading propaganda? How are people going to find that out now? Like what's going on?
And I think this is interesting because, yes, there's propaganda, and that creates a bit of a dilemma, a problem for them. On the other hand, a lot of that propaganda was not necessarily reflective of reality anyway. It's highly curated or distorted
But
reality. But,
misinformation is
but
better than lack of
yeah,
information.
this is it. I think there's another problem here, and this is one which Michael Naki has been talking about for a couple of years, and that is that actually these communication platforms have been the critical kind of grease in the Russian machine, because the standard cogs of the Russian military hierarchy don't allow dissension of communication or really in any way to sort of tell the commanders they failed or things are a bad idea. So I think the far more important role of these Z Patriots is actually through these one-on-one communications and their own Telegram communities, is to actually communicate where things are breaking down, where things are going wrong, and to articulate the problem and perhaps start to feel for solutions. So I think it's not just a problem broadly speaking for propaganda. It is a fundamental problem for the learning process of the Russian military. And let's face it, they have incrementally learnt some of the lessons, and they have refined and improved and unfortunately innovated in certain places. Well, this just kills that off. So I think they really are going to be massively damaging their own war effort by doing this. And then if you think at the iteration speed of warfare, the fact that you need to communicate technical changes to your drones, its setup, electronic warfare, frequencies, etc. Well, if you kill these instant communications, you kill this rapid innovation cycle as well.
And perhaps this is an opportunity for our audience to weigh in and let us know what you're thinking. Because do you feel that this is more about Ukraine winning, or is this more about Russia being stuck? You can decide which is the more appropriate view here, even though maybe it's 60-40, 40-60, 70-30. You decide. This is where I like to encourage our audience to participate and weigh in, because it's interesting to hear what they think. I personally have stayed off of Telegram as much as I could, as
Oh
well
yeah,
as off of X as well. I mean, it's hard to get information, but I have little time for disinformation.
I
So
deleted Telegram on recommendations because
did you?
yeah, whereas it's been said that it's encrypted. It's my understanding that it really is not encrypted, and it's potentially the case that the GRU may have backdoors into the data. I mean, I don't know the technical details. I'm sure someone in the audience does, but I've been advised, and a lot of Ukrainians on the front are advised not to use Telegram because of its potentially nefarious use by the enemy.
Well, that may be news to some Russian speakers.
Yes, I would be very careful. I mean, if you're in the diaspora and you're not necessarily, a big political figure, then maybe it doesn't matter too much. But just put it this way: if you want to keep stuff properly secret, or if you've got genuinely sensitive technical information, yeah, don't stick it in Telegram.
There you go. Um, so in that case, then perhaps Ukraine is winning because Ukraine has withstood 12 years of war and continues to show its ability to defend itself with technological revolution. That has gotten to the point that the United States is now looking to buy Ukrainian drones. And this is a battlefield where things are evolving all the time, as you know all too well. And you will tell, you share in your channel, about that. So maybe this is just a matter of time before Russia understands that collapse. Because how can a swamp collapse? That doesn't work like that. So it will
All you
just
can do is get sucked down into it. I think that's how the swamp works, isn't it? Stuff disappears; it never rises up out of the swamp.
right. And there's things like hunger, the mutiny, and uprisings for different things where people really, maybe they don't have any information. Maybe they just get the official party line that we have taken Pokrovsk for the 360th time this year, and every day. And that's all there's going to be, and no more information. But it seems to me like that's really creating a more dangerous situation, because people who feel like they are lost and they don't have any way out. But Russians, they'll just find another way. They'll just go, there will be some Telegram light, that will be some Chinese equivalent, or somebody else will come up with something, or they'll be sitting there sending on battery, knocking on batteries. But people are people in the sense that we want to get information somehow. And
Starlink's the other one, because I think it's interesting that the sort of Starlink cutoff and this Telegram ban happened roughly in parallel. I don't think they're necessarily linked, actually, but it's kind of interesting that two things that actually were dramatically increasing the effectiveness of Russian forces and their
do you
innovation loops was Starlink and these communication networks, and both are now under severe strain or removed.
Do you think this is on, like, Elon Musk did this with Putin's permission? Is that kind of what you're?
I don't know. It's not. No, I think there's something else going on there. I mean, I suspect that it's a fairly self-interested move, or a calculation that, because what Russia had started doing was attaching Starlinks to drones, whereas previously the long-range drones would have their coordinates set in and their target setting would be done at launch, and then you can't iterate along the way. They just they carry on until they hit their target or something near the target. Well, by strapping Starlinks on there, they could start to hit moving targets, and they could actually iterate and start to sort of dodge interception, or take different trajectories, or they could spoof where they're going and then suddenly change at the last minute or alter target. So using strapping Starlinks to Garans or whatever gives them a huge number of options and greater lethality. Well, their first choice of target, which is classic Putin, classic, unfortunately, Russian army, was to hit a passenger train, a civilian passenger train. And I think the optics for Musk's brand of his Starlinks being used to massacre civilians, that's just a little bit too much for his shareholders or whatever. So I don't think this was done out of any kind of care. He's just protecting his investments. But it has to be said, as Mikhail Fedorov, the Minister of Defense, now Minister of Digital Infrastructure previously, he did say that X was fully working assiduously with them. And this wasn't just flicking a switch. I believe considerable amount of work was required to communicate with them and agree the parameters of this whitelist. So this is quite interesting that Musk was
Here's
forced
another
to
comment.
cooperate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see. I think EU
No,
leaders
I think
strong
EU
arm
leaders
Musk
also.
into. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think it's political and commercial pressure. I think it was this twin set, this twin track of that, and of course the threat to pull the plug on Musk's operations in Europe. But I also think ultimately there's a commercial consideration there, which is this does not look good for your brands. It just does not look good to be a key component in war crimes.
It's nice to know that there's certain things that don't look good, because we live in the I live in the United States, and we have so many things that don't look good but yet are still going on, that it's
Or
nice to
which
know.
Fox News can spin into, this is great.
Yes, I get a kick out of the fact, by the way, I think we've discussed this in the past, but that they have a Messenger Max now that everybody's supposed to run through everything, and they're supposed, and then now there's an opening of American right wing news outlet Newsmax that's going to be in Ukraine operating, promoting American Trump related propaganda. That sounds really bizarre, but they had a Max, now there's going to be Newsmax. I think
There was a great post by Ilya Ponomarenko,
Ponomarenko.
Ukrainian. No,
Oh,
Ponomarenko is
Ponomarenko. Pardon. Yes.
the Kiev Post, ex-Kiev Post defense correspondent, and he just said, look, Ukrainians are often very politically clued up. They will discuss stuff. They'll have very vigorous discussions about all sorts of stuff. And of course, the first thing they'll do is say, okay, well, this Newsmax thing is coming. Who's behind it? Who's funding it? Who are the heads behind it? And of course, it turns out to be Yulia Tymoshenko, who is a completely, she has no credibility. No credibility. And of course, most Ukrainians, as soon as they find out who is behind this network, are not going to watch it, simply because they know exactly in whose interests it will be operated. So I think this is a colossal waste of money, which in this instance will not have any effect whatsoever, simply because they don't understand to whom they are broadcasting, and they assume that here's some ignorant peasants who will lap this stuff up, not realizing Ukrainians are typically far more politically sophisticated than the average Western voter now.
Yes, and they even though they're being assaulted with clickbait titles, but it's interesting that they do attach a large amount of value and reputation to a person's last name who associated with that or another project, and this is part of, I think, living in an oligarchy where you kind of go, oh, which oligarch is involved with this? Oh, because they kind of seem to have, like there's a Fabrika Navin, which is Akhmetov, and then there's the TV Kiev, which is like Klitschko's or something, that they're all like have some powerful benefactor who takes care of. And so when you have Newsmax and it's attached to somebody with I don't know, like a negative reputation, then that essentially puts crosses.
I think it matters. I think it certainly
That makes it
matters.
easier.
It does, and of course, a lot of this oligarchic ownership of the media has been removed in the context of full-scale war. So this is reintroducing something which they've been assiduously trying to rid themselves of. Now, it has to be said, there are still some oligarchs who are, let's say, funding or keeping certain media operations afloat. The Kiev Post has a particularly sort of interesting sort of oligarchic connection. But generally speaking, from the mass media, the ones you mentioned that are going clickbaity because they've got declining audience share, they've done a lot more to squeeze these moneyed interests out of their media. Something else we've talked about. The chances of us doing it are lower, but actually, until we do tackle that one,
But
and
it is
see, you know,
it's a little bit interesting, worth noting that Ukrainian audiences have become sophisticated not through ethical behavior by information presenters, but because they've been dumped on a lot of information on, and they had to become sophisticated through consumption of it and choosing and learning, becoming experienced themselves. And second, of course, is the war, which raises stakes and everything.
it does raise the stakes and everything. And I think to an extent, to have a healthy media environment, you cannot just be a net consumer of information. I think what Ukrainians have had to become, and actually it's sort of in the culture as well, is, you know, ferocious debaters of information. So I think the onus cannot just be on the media environment. In fact, you will not end up with a healthy media environment if you're just net consumers of the products that they push on you. You have to have a healthy civic debate. You have to have pushback, dialogue, and this has to be incredibly vigorous as a kind of counterbalance. Then you have a chance, maybe, of with this continuous pressure and questioning, you know, evolve your media into something, you know, more agile and higher quality. It's an interesting kind of question there, one which we, you know, as this guy today pointed out, the lack of stories about this sort of, you know, we're in a sort of prelude to World War III. It suggests that you know, broad swathes of the media feel far more comfortable sensationalizing trivia rather than dealing with the big picture. That we're back to the sort of don't look up kind of scenario.
Indeed, it is. Jonathan, it's been a pleasure always to chat with you and to kind of see what's happening on both sides, not just in geographically, but language-wise. And before we leave, I got to acknowledge that was a really awesome stream that you hosted, but then was kind of spread all over by different people. And I'm kind of thinking I want to try doing something like that in Russian more, because I think it's a really good idea. In Russian space, it's much more of a habit of kind of what we're doing, which is that
Yeah.
one-on-one style, and one person asks a question and the other one talks for a long period of time. It's a style, it's a genre, but it is kind of nice to have exactly what you did, where you have all these different YouTubers who speak about, you know, share a lot of the same topics and audiences, but it's a nice opportunity to exchange points of view, reintroduce different viewers to each other. And you know, I think it's really great. So I appreciate you
Well,
doing
I'm
it.
so glad you could join that as well, and I think your input was massively appreciated, and hopefully, you know, it's another avenue to appear on their channels and vice versa. What also I wasn't planning for, but which came out of that, I think was a very healthy sort of pushback, and not just dialogue, but quite a robust debate where people were questioning what the other was saying and pushing back on some things and giving their point of view. So it felt to me that this was a new avenue in not these sort of artificial getting, you know, two people who are diametrically opposed or one person that's spewing Russian propaganda. Well, it isn't. I don't think that's at all a healthy environment. But having people who broadly are kind of agree and coming from the same thing, but are still having quite a knockabout conversation, you know, and not afraid to, you know, in the best possible way, pull a few strips off each other. I think that was useful, and we should do more of that.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks to everyone who joined us. Hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Slava
See you
Ukraini.
next time. Haram Slava.